The reason I wrote this book, Is God Real?, is because 200 times a second around the clock, someone on planet Earth is typing into a search engine basically the question, is God real? And
wow.
I know, it's amazing. My publisher found this out and went to me and said, why don't you write a book responding to that call, Is God Real? So I think that shows a curiosity that people have. You know, back in the 1950s, if you would ask the average American, are you a Christian? They say, oh, of course I'm a Christian. Every American's a Christian. Were they Christians? No, they weren't really. Now, if you ask somebody, you're a Christian, they may very well say, no, I'm not. I would rather them say that than pretend that they are. And so let's start where we're really at so we can have a real conversation about where does the evidence lead.
Lee Strobel joining us today, noted Christian apologist, author and speaker, joining us here on this edition of the Meeting House from the Christian Product Expo Summer 2023 show in Lexington, Kentucky. So I appreciate what you were saying because, of course, so often we find, as you noted, that people, just because of church attendance, that they consider themselves to be Christian.
Right.
I think you have to look. In fact, I've got some Gallup data about belief in God that has gone down. And sometimes you really have to take some of these surveys with a grain of salt, don't you? Because somebody might say, well, I'm a Christian. And as George Barna would probably say, well, we're talking about self-professed Christian, and then of course he would apply his criteria to that and find that, well, you got a lot of Christians that don't have a Christian worldview perspective. So we've got that out there, but now it's a matter, like you say, that people are authentically saying, no, I don't believe. I am not a Christian.
And I think that's a great place to start.
And I was going to say, explain that if you would.
Exactly. I mean, that's what my book addresses, Is God Real? I have 6 chapters or so that look at what is the evidence from science, from history and philosophy that point powerfully and persuasively toward the existence of the God of the Bible. And I think the evidence is quite persuasive to those that are willing to really investigate it and really willing to check it out. And I find that there's sufficient amount of curiosity among people that it's not hard to get into a spiritual conversation. It's not hard to share the gospel today. Now, granted, there's pockets of hostility. People question, is God real and is God good? But I think we have good responses to that as well.
And what you said about the internet, technology can be a wonderful tool if we use it in the right way. And so when you talk about people that are searching for those 3 words, is God real? And you're finding that there is a tremendous amount of curiosity about spiritual things. And I think about some of these different, as you might say, media phenomenon that are taking place. Where, again, you're seeing people are curious. So where does that leave us as believers when we find the curiosity seekers that are asking the questions? How do we get involved in doing the answering?
Sure. That's such a great open door when people are willing to say, I don't really believe. Well, are you willing to talk about it? Well, sure. And to have a discussion and ask them, why don't you believe? That's a great question to ask because people often assume you don't believe because of X, Y, or Z when you may have a totally different reason. So I like to ask, here's what I like to ask people when they're openly curious. If you could ask God any one question and you knew He'd give you an answer right now, what would you ask Him? That really gets the nub of what's holding them back from God. They may say, we lost a daughter in childbirth 3 years ago. Where was God in the middle of that? Okay, why does God allow pain and suffering? Legitimate question. Or I have neighbors who are Muslims and Hindus. Why should I believe the Bible rather than some other book? So people have authentic, legitimate questions. And that's frankly why I wrote the case, Is God Real? Because it's a book that you can give to someone. In fact, I put discussion questions in it. So if you wanted to get together, say, really, you have questions, so did I, and I found some good answers. Why don't we read this book together, and there's discussion questions in there. We can have a conversation. And to just sit down and have a period of time where you meet periodically and talk about the issues raised by the book, that can be a very fruitful experience.